Today, we have a brand new term to learn and apply to stories. Most recently, we've read The Flight of Icarus, and we'll be looking for our new idea in that story. By now, we've covered plot mountain and theme. Today's idea is something you've probably already seen before on TV or in books without knowing it. What I'm talking about is when the author leaves clues or hints about what's going to happen later in the story. This is to make you guess, think about, or anticipate what might happen to the characters. This is another way to give your brain a workout. These hints and clues are called foreshadowing. We can remember this word, what it means, and what it's for by breaking it down into two parts. For is like before. Shadow indicates that you can tell what you're seeing, but not all the way, the same way a shadow gives you a shape, but only a shape. So, foreshadowing means you can sort of see what's going to happen before it does. Here's a famous visual example from Star Wars. This is one of the posters from 1999's Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. We see the main character, Anakin Skywalker, as a little boy. Fans of Star Wars can tell you that Anakin Skywalker eventually becomes Darth Vader. Did you notice the shadow behind the little boy? That is the shadow of his evil, fully grown self. The picture shows people foreshadowing, as if to say, this harmless-looking child will one day be a deadly warlord. Here's another movie example. Perhaps you've seen Back to the Future, which takes place in the year 1985. Our main character on the right is Marty McFly. After being late one day to school, the principal catches Marty McFly and scolds him for his bad attitude towards school. He then tells him that no McFly has ever amounted to anything in the history of this town. Marty responds by saying, "History is about to change." What Marty means is that he's going to be somebody important soon. But if you've seen the movie, you will know that Marty saying history is about to change is foreshadowing, because that night he accidentally goes back in time to the 1950s, meets his parents as teenagers, and actually does change history. History really was about to change. Here, real history meets fiction. A lot of people have seen the 1997 movie Titanic. Perhaps you are one of them. Even if you're not, and even if you didn't know what happened to the real Titanic, you can spot the foreshadowing in this movie. This is a case where the foreshadowing happens because people insist something isn't going to happen. I know that sounds strange, but think about TV comedy shows that you've seen. Characters always say, "What could possibly go wrong?" Or, "What's the worst that could happen?" Many characters early in the film, from the captain to the shipbuilder to the owner of the Titanic, all keep saying the same thing about the ship. Unsinkable. Later, one of our main characters can't help but notice that there aren't enough lifeboats for everyone in case they're needed. Her evil fiancé Cal says, it'll be fine. The foreshadowing is strong with this one. One iceberg later, and we all know how that turned out. There's been foreshadowing in the stories we've read so far as well. Remember Rogue Wave? If you recall, the main characters, Scoot and Sully, were trapped in their wrecked ship after being turned over by a giant wave. Here's a passage from early in the story. I'll give you 30 seconds to reread it. Here's another passage a short time later. Give that a 20-second read and tell me if you notice something similar. In these passages, you may have noticed that both characters are having a great time, feeling like it's a perfect, happy day and nothing can go wrong. It's similar to Titanic, since the characters feel like everything is fine and will stay that way. But even if this were the first time you'd read the story, you'd probably guess, think about, or anticipate that this wasn't the case. How? Here, we jump back to the beginning. Notice the line number. It describes a rogue wave that has been drifting around the Pacific Ocean, causing damage and killing people. The author would never have mentioned that if it wasn't going to come into play later, and it just so happens we will soon meet our main characters out on that same ocean. We also recently read Big Things Come in Small Packages by Eleanora E. Tate. You'll remember that Tucker hated being called names for being short, and by the end of the story, he had rescued a man from a storm at sea. Notice the line of foreshadowing the author uses early in the story as a way to keep us reading. By saying that Tucker is about to do something great, we want to keep reading and find out, maybe even guess, think about, or anticipate what it could be. Later in the story, she uses a subtler image to foreshadow the danger Tucker is about to face. She mentions a dark storm approaching the beach the main character is on. On one hand, the storm does become a problem for Tucker, but it also gives us an image sort of like this. When we picture a storm approaching, it gives us a similar feeling to the one from Star Wars. It gives us the idea that danger is approaching. Your turn to think. Why would we practice looking for examples of foreshadowing before doing today's assignment? While you guess, think about, or anticipate that. Be sure to head over to Google Classroom for today's assignment, The Flight of Icarus, Analyze the Text 2.